The dying light of sunset painted the Montana sky blood red as Daisy Miller pressed a cool cloth to her baby's fevered brow, tears streaming down her dust-stained cheeks. 18-month-old Joseph's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, each one more labored than the last. 3 days of high fever had left him limp as a rag doll, his chubby face now gaunt and flushed with alarming heat. "Please, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking as she rocked him in the creaking chair. "Just hold on a little longer." The year was 1879, and Daisy had been alone on her small homestead since her husband Thomas died 6 months ago, crushed beneath a fallen tree he'd been clearing. At 22, she was now a widow with a sick child and 40 acres of unforgiving land that seemed determined to break her. The nearest doctor was in Silverwood, over 30 miles away. Even if she could make the journey, how would she carry Joseph in his condition? Her horse had gone lame 2 weeks prior, and the neighbor who occasionally checked on her wasn't due for another 3 days. As darkness settled over the modest cabin, Daisy felt a desperation unlike anything she had ever known. Joseph's skin burned against hers, his little chest rising and falling with alarming irregularity. He hadn't been able to keep any water down since morning. "I won't lose you too," she promised, kissing his damp forehead. "I can't." The knock at her door came so suddenly that Daisy nearly dropped the child. It was well past 9 o'clock, far too late for any decent visitor. She hesitated, clutching Joseph closer to her chest as the knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Who's there?" she called, her voice stronger than she felt. "Madam, I'm sorry to trouble you so late." The voice was deep, tinged with a slight southern drawl. "My name's Zachary Wade. I was passing by and saw your lamp still burning. Is everything all right?" Daisy hesitated, her free hand moving toward the rifle propped beside the door. Since Thomas died, she'd learned to be cautious. "My baby's sick," she answered finally, desperation winning out over caution. "Real sick." There was a pause before the man spoke again. "I ain't a doctor, madam, but I've seen my share of fevers. Would you allow me to take a look?" Against her better judgment, Daisy unbolted the door with one hand, keeping Joseph balanced on her hip. The man who stood on her porch was tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Trail dust covered his denim pants and worn leather vest, and a pistol hung at his side. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear blue and earnest in the lamplight. "I mean no harm," he said softly, removing his hat. His dark hair was longer than most, tied back with a leather cord. "I was heading to Silverwood when I saw your light." "Silverwood?" Hope sparked in Daisy's chest. "There's a doctor there. My baby, he's burning up. He can't keep anything down." Zachary stepped inside, his movements careful as if trying not to frighten her. His gaze fell to the feverish child, and concern immediately tightened his features. "How long's he been like this?" "3 days now. It just keeps getting worse." Daisy couldn't hold back a sob. "I don't know what to do anymore." The stranger moved closer, gently placing a calloused hand on Joseph's forehead. He frowned, then reached for the child's wrist, counting silently as he felt for a pulse. "Madam, your boy needs a doctor, and soon." His voice was steady but grave. "This fever's too high, and he's looking mighty dehydrated." "I know that," Daisy snapped, then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, I don't have a way to get him there. My horse went lame, and I can't carry him all that way myself." Zachary straightened, his decision already made. "I'll take him." "What?" "I'll take him to the doctor in Silverwood. My horse is strong and fast. We can make it by dawn if we leave now." Daisy stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. "Why would you do that? You don't know us." A shadow passed over his face. "I've seen what fever can do when left untreated. No child should suffer that fate if I can help it." He paused. "Unless you'd rather wait for someone else." Joseph whimpered in her arms, his tiny body trembling with another fever spike. Daisy knew there was no time to wait for someone else. "I'm coming with you," she said firmly. "Madam, it's a hard ride. He's my son. I'm coming." Her tone left no room for argument. Zachary nodded, respecting her determination. "We'll need to wrap him warm. The night air's getting cold." Within minutes, Daisy had gathered what she needed: a small bag with clean cloths, the last of the willow bark tea she'd been trying to give Joseph, and a blanket to wrap him in. She worked quickly, fighting back tears as she bundled her son against the night chill. "Do you have a coat?" Zachary asked, watching her work. "Yes," Daisy replied, though the thin shawl she pulled around her shoulders could hardly be called adequate protection against the Montana night. Zachary frowned but didn't comment. Instead, he shrugged out of his leather duster and held it out to her. "Take this. It's going to be a cold ride." "I can't, please." His eyes met hers. "I've got my vest and shirt. The ride will keep me warm enough." Reluctantly, Daisy accepted the coat, wrapping it around herself and Joseph. It smelled of leather, tobacco, and the open prairie not unpleasant, she thought fleetingly. Outside, Zachary's horse stood patiently at the hitching post, a magnificent black stallion that stomped impatiently when he approached. "This is Midnight," he said, running a hand down the horse's muscular neck. "He's the fastest horse in 3 territories and stubborn as the day is long. He'll get us there." Zachary mounted first, then reached down for Joseph. Daisy hesitated only a moment before passing her precious bundle up to him. The care with which the stranger cradled her son against his chest eased her fear somewhat. Then he extended his hand to her. "Put your foot in the stirrup and hold tight to my arm." With surprising strength, he pulled her up behind him. Daisy had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist to stay balanced, Joseph secure between them. "Hold on tight," Zachary warned, and then they were off, the powerful horse carrying them away from the cabin and into the darkness. The night was clear but moonless, the stars providing only faint illumination for their journey. Zachary seemed to know the way instinctively, guiding Midnight along paths Daisy could barely see. The terrain was rough, rolling hills giving way to rocky passes and stretches of open prairie. Each jostle made her tighten her grip around Zachary's waist, terrified of falling. "How are you holding up?" he called back after they'd been riding for nearly an hour. "I'm fine," Daisy answered, though her thighs were already burning from the unaccustomed position. "How's Joseph?" Zachary glanced down at the bundle secured against his chest. "Still hot, but he's breathing steady. That's a good sign." "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for what this stranger was doing. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." "Just happened to be in the right place," he replied, his voice carried away by the wind. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic pounding of Midnight's hooves the only sound. Despite her exhaustion, Daisy couldn't sleep. Every few minutes, she would reach around to touch Joseph's face, reassuring herself that he was still breathing. "You homesteading that place alone?" Zachary asked eventually, his voice breaking through the night. "Not by choice," Daisy answered after a moment. "My husband died last winter. It's just been Joseph and me since then." She felt him stiffen slightly beneath her hands. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's not easy trying to make it on your own out here." "No, it's not," Daisy's voice caught, "but it's our home. I promised Thomas I'd keep it." They crested a hill and Zachary reined Midnight to a stop, giving the horse a moment to catch his breath. In the distance, Daisy could see the faint outline of mountains against the star-filled sky. "We're making good time," he said, checking on Joseph again. "About a third of the way there." "Who are you, Mr. Wade?" Daisy asked suddenly. "Why were you passing my homestead so late?" Zachary was quiet for a moment, adjusting his hold on the reins. "I was a Texas Ranger once upon a time. Now I just drift where the work takes me. I was heading to Silverwood because I heard they needed men for a cattle drive starting next week." A Texas Ranger. Despite everything, Daisy was impressed. The Rangers were legendary even this far north. For 7 years. There was something in his tone that suggested those years hadn't all been good ones. Left after the war. Seemed like the right time for a change. Before she could ask more, Joseph stirred against him, letting out a pitiful cry that tore at Daisy's heart. "We need to keep moving," Zachary said, urging Midnight forward again. The terrain grew more challenging as they continued, the path narrowing as they entered a wooded area. Branches reached out like grasping fingers in the darkness, forcing them to slow their pace. Joseph's cries grew more frequent, each one driving a spike of fear through Daisy's heart. "He's getting worse," she said, her voice tight with panic. "We need to go faster." "We will once we clear these trees," Zachary promised. "Just a little longer." As if in response to her worry, the sky opened up, and rain began to fall light at first, then quickly becoming a steady downpour that soaked through their clothing despite Zachary's duster. "Hold on." He shouted over the sound of the rain, spurring Midnight to a faster pace through the treacherous terrain. Daisy pressed her face against Zachary's back, trying to shield Joseph from the worst of the rain. Cold water ran down her neck and back, but she barely noticed, all her concern focused on her child. They emerged from the woods onto an open stretch of land, and Zachary immediately urged Midnight into a gallop. The powerful horse responded willingly, eating up the distance with long strides despite the slippery ground. The rain continued for nearly an hour before finally slackening, leaving them drenched and chilled to the bone. Joseph had fallen into an uneasy sleep, his breathing shallow but steady. "There's a small trading post about 2 miles ahead," Zachary said, his voice rough from the cold. "We can stop, get dry, and check on the boy." "No," Daisy insisted. "We can't stop, not until we reach the doctor." Zachary twisted in the saddle to look at her. Rain had plastered her blonde hair to her face, and her lips were blue with cold, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "You'll catch your death in these wet clothes," he argued. "Better me than my son," she replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. Something like respect flickered in his eyes before he turned back around. "As you wish, but at least take this." He unwound the bandana from his neck and passed it back to her. "It's still mostly dry, use it to wipe his face." Daisy accepted it gratefully, carefully dabbing at Joseph's flushed face. The child stirred at her touch but didn't wake. They rode on through the night, stopping only briefly to let Midnight drink from a stream. Zachary dismounted to stretch his legs, then helped Daisy down, steadying her when her numb legs nearly buckled beneath her. "Just a few minutes," he promised, taking Joseph from her arms to give her a rest. "We're making good time." Daisy nodded, too exhausted to argue. She watched as Zachary walked with Joseph, the large man looking incongruously gentle as he cradled her son, murmuring softly to him though the child was asleep. "He's a fighter," Zachary said, glancing up at her. "Got strong lungs." "Like his father," Daisy replied, a sad smile touching her lips. "Thomas always said Joseph would grow up to be the strongest man in Montana territory." "I believe it." Zachary's expression softened as he looked down at the child. "My sister had 4 little ones, helped deliver 2 of them myself when the doctor couldn't make it in time." "Where is your sister now?" Daisy asked, stretching her aching muscles. A shadow passed over his face. "She died. Cholera took her and 3 of the children back in '71. I'm sorry." Daisy's heart ached for him. "And the 4th child, my nephew William. He's 15 now, living with my brother in Denver." Pride crept into his voice. "Smart as a whip. Going to be a doctor someday, he says." Before Daisy could respond, Joseph began to cry again, his little body racked with tremors. Alarm flashed across Zachary's face. "His fever's spiking again," he said, quickly handing the child back to Daisy. "We need to keep moving." They mounted again, the brief rest having done little to ease their exhaustion. As they continued their journey, the sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly in the east, the first hint of approaching dawn. "Tell me about your homestead," Zachary said after they'd been riding for another hour, his voice cutting through Daisy's fog of worry and fatigue. "What?" she asked, startled by the question. "Your homestead. What do you grow there?" Daisy realized he was trying to keep her awake and focused. "Wheat mostly, some vegetables for ourselves. Thomas had started an orchard before she swallowed hard. Just a few apple trees. They bore fruit for the first time this year. Apples, nothing beats a fresh apple pie in the fall." Despite everything, Daisy found herself smiling. That's what Thomas always said. He had quite the sweet tooth. How'd you end up in Montana? Zachary asked, adjusting his hold on Joseph as they navigated a steep incline. Thomas had a dream of open spaces. We came out from Pennsylvania 4 years ago, just after we married. I was 18 and thought we were invincible. She paused, remembering. The first winter nearly broke us. But we survived and things got better. We built the cabin together, planted the fields. When Joseph came along, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. Her voice caught on the last words and she fell silent, thinking of how quickly it had all fallen apart. Dreams are worth fighting for, Zachary said quietly. Even when they don't turn out like we expected. Something in his tone made Daisy wonder what dreams he had lost along the way. As dawn broke fully across the eastern sky, the terrain began to change, becoming more populated. They passed a few isolated homesteads, smoke rising from chimneys as families began their day, unaware of the desperate journey passing by their doorsteps. Almost there, Zachary encouraged as they crested a hill, and the small town of Silverwood came into view in the valley below. Just hold on a little longer. Midnight seemed to sense the urgency, finding renewed energy as they thundered down the hill toward the town. The stallion's coat was dark with sweat, his breathing labored, but he never faltered. The town was just beginning to stir as they rode down the main street, a few early risers stopping to stare at the unusual sight, a man and woman on a lathered horse, clutching a small bundle between them. "Where's the doctor?" Zachary called to a man sweeping the boardwalk in front of the general store. "End of the street, white house with the green shutters," the man replied, pointing. They found the doctor's house quickly, a modest 2-story structure with a small sign reading "Doctor James Wilson, physician," hanging beside the door. Zachary reined Midnight to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to take Joseph from Daisy's arms. "I've got him," he assured her, helping her down with his free hand. Daisy's legs nearly gave way beneath her, numb from the long ride. Zachary steadied her with a strong arm around her waist, and together they approached the doctor's door. Daisy knocked frantically, fear giving her renewed strength. "Dr. Wilson, please, we need help." After what seemed an eternity, the door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with spectacles and rumpled hair, clearly just awakened. His irritation quickly vanished when he saw Joseph's condition. "Bring him in," he ordered, stepping aside. "How long has he been like this?" 3 days with fever, Daisy explained as they followed him inside. "He can't keep anything down. He was getting better yesterday morning, but then got much worse by evening." The doctor led them to an examination room off the main hallway, gesturing for Zachary to place Joseph on the table. The child whimpered as he was laid down, his eyes fluttering open briefly before closing again. "You rode through the night to get here?" Dr. Wilson asked, already unwrapping Joseph from his blankets. "Yes," Daisy replied, hovering anxiously at the edge of the table. "From our homestead near Creek's Crossing." The doctor raised his eyebrows. "That's over 30 miles, you must have ridden hard." "We did what was necessary," Zachary said simply, standing back to give the doctor room to work. "Doctor." Wilson examined Joseph thoroughly, his expression grave as he listened to the child's chest and felt his pulse. Daisy watched every movement, barely breathing, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles showed white. "It's pneumonia," the doctor said finally. "Quite advanced. The fever's dangerously high and his lungs are congested." Daisy felt the room spin around her. "Well, is he going to?" She couldn't form the terrible question. The doctor's face softened. "We'll do everything we can, Mrs. Miller, Daisy Miller, Mrs. Miller, your son is very ill, but you got him here in time. I believe we can help him." Relief made Daisy's knees buckle, and she would have fallen if Zachary hadn't caught her elbow, supporting her with his steady strength. "What can you do for him?" Zachary asked, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I'll prepare a poultice for his chest to help break up the congestion, and I have medicines to bring down the fever. Most importantly, we need to get fluids into him." Dr. Wilson was already moving to a cabinet, taking out bottles and jars. It will take time and careful nursing, but children can be remarkably resilient. I'll stay with him, Daisy said immediately. Whatever he needs, I'll do it. The doctor nodded. Of course, but first you both need to get warm and dry. You're no good to your son if you fall ill yourself. As if on cue, Daisy began to shiver uncontrollably, the adrenaline that had sustained her through the night finally giving way to exhaustion and cold. Mrs. Wilson can find you some dry clothes, the doctor continued, noting her condition with concern. And there's hot coffee in the kitchen, Mr. Wade, Zachary Wade. Mr. Wade, I can't thank you enough for getting them here. Not many men would ride through a night like that for strangers. Zachary shrugged uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same. No, Daisy said, turning to face him fully for the first time since they'd arrived. Not anyone. You saved my son's life. I can never repay you for that. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a connection forged in the crucible of their desperate journey. For a moment it seemed as if Zachary might say something more, but then he simply nodded, his expression unreadable. I should see to midnight, he said, breaking the moment. He's had a hard night. Of course, Dr. Wilson replied. The livery stable is just down the street. Tell Frank I sent you. He'll take good care of your horse. Zachary hesitated, looking at Joseph once more. You'll let me know if there's any change. I will, Daisy promised, surprised by his continued concern. With a final nod, Zachary left, his spurs jangling softly as he walked away. The next hours passed in a blur for Daisy. Mrs. Wilson, a kind-faced woman with efficient hands, provided her with dry clothes and insisted she eat something while the doctor tended to Joseph. The hot soup and bread revived her somewhat, but she couldn't truly rest until she was back at her son's side. Dr. Wilson had moved Joseph to a small bedroom off the main house, where he could be monitored constantly. He had applied a mustard poultice to the child's chest and given him a medicinal syrup to reduce the fever and help with the coughing. By mid-morning, Joseph was sleeping more peacefully, though his breathing was still labored. The next 24 hours will be critical, Doctor. Wilson explained as he checked Joseph's pulse again. But I'm encouraged by how he's responding already. Daisy sat beside the bed, holding her son's tiny hand in hers. Thank you, Doctor. I don't know what I would have done if, she couldn't finish the thought. You can thank that cowboy of yours, the doctor said kindly. Not many men would have undertaken such a journey, especially for folks they'd just met. He's not my cowboy, Daisy corrected quickly. I'd never seen him before last night. He was just passing by. Dr. Wilson raised his eyebrows. Is that so? Well, Providence works in mysterious ways. You get some rest, Mrs. Miller. I'll look in on the boy regularly. Left alone with Joseph, Daisy felt the full weight of the night's events crash down upon her. She had nearly lost her son, would have lost him if not for the timely appearance of a stranger with kind eyes and a fast horse. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over, running unchecked down her face as she watched Joseph's chest rise and fall. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the room was filled with afternoon sunlight and someone was gently shaking her shoulder. Mrs. Miller. It was Mrs. Wilson. I'm sorry to wake you, but Mr. Wade is here. He'd like to know how the boy is doing. Daisy straightened up, wincing at the stiffness in her neck. Of course, please send him in. A moment later, Zachary appeared in the doorway. He had cleaned up since she'd last seen him, his face washed free of trail dust, his hair still damp from what must have been a recent bath. He changed into a clean shirt as well, though he still wore the same worn leather vest. How is he? He asked, his eyes going immediately to Joseph. Better, Daisy replied, managing a tired smile. The doctor says his fever is coming down. He was able to take a little broth about an hour ago. Relief softened Zachary's features. That's good news. It's all thanks to you. Daisy's voice wavered with emotion. If you hadn't come along when you did, you'd have found another way, he said, moving further into the room. A woman determined to save her child is a force to be reckoned with. Daisy shook her head. There was no other way. No one else would have come by for days. She looked up at him, meeting his gaze directly. You saved his life, Mr. Wade, and mine too, because I couldn't have lived if I'd lost him. Zachary looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. I'm just glad I was passing by. He gestured to the chair beside her. May I? At her nod, he sat down, his large frame making the wooden chair seem small. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, watching Joseph sleep. I've arranged for rooms at the hotel, Zachary said eventually. For when the doctor says he can be moved, you'll both need a comfortable place to recover before the journey home. Daisy turned to him in surprise. That's very generous, but I can't accept, please, he interrupted. It would ease my mind to know you're both comfortable. Before she could argue further, Joseph stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked confused and frightened until his gaze fell on Daisy. Mama, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm here, sweetheart, she said, immediately bending over him. Mama's right here. Joseph's eyes drifted to Zachary, widening slightly. Who dat? This is Mr. Wade, Daisy explained softly. He helped bring you to the doctor when you were sick. Joseph studied Zachary with solemn eyes before offering a tiny smile. Thank you. Zachary looked startled, then genuinely touched. You're welcome, little man. That's quite a strong voice you've got there. The child's attention span was short. His eyes were already closing again, the brief interaction having tired him out. Within moments, he was asleep once more, but his breathing seemed easier than before. He likes you, Daisy observed. Kids usually do, Zachary replied with a half smile, not sure why. My nephew says it's because I don't talk down to them. That's probably it. Daisy studied him curiously. You never mentioned if you have children of your own. A shadow passed over his face. No, never had the chance to settle down that way. There was a story there, Daisy sensed, but before she could ask more, Dr. Wilson entered the room. How's our patient? He asked, moving to check on Joseph. He woke up and spoke, Daisy reported eagerly. Just for a moment, but he knew me, and his voice was stronger. The doctor nodded, looking pleased as he felt Joseph's forehead. The fever's definitely coming down. I'd say he's turning the corner. He turned to Zachary. Mr. Wade, I understand you've been quite the good Samaritan. Zachary shrugged. Just did what needed doing. Well, thanks to your quick action, I believe this young man will make a full recovery. The doctor adjusted Joseph's blanket. He'll need to stay here another day or two for observation, but after that, he can convalesce at the hotel until he's strong enough for the journey home. How long do you think that will be? Daisy asked anxiously. At least a week, probably 2. Pneumonia takes time to overcome completely, especially in one so young. Daisy's heart sank. 2 weeks in Silverwood would cost money she didn't have, not to mention leaving the homestead unattended for so long. Don't worry about the cost, Dr. Wilson said, correctly interpreting her expression. We'll work something out. And I've already taken care of the hotel, Zachary added. I can't let you do that, Daisy protested. You've done too much already. Consider it an investment in Joseph's future, Zachary said firmly. That boy's going to do great things someday, I can tell, Doctor. Wilson smiled at the exchange. I'll leave you two to sort it out. Mrs. Miller, try to get some rest. I'll have my wife bring you both some dinner later. After the doctor left, Daisy turned to Zachary, determined to make him understand. Mr. Wade, while I appreciate your generosity, I can't accept charity. I'll find a way to pay for our stay. It's not charity, he insisted. It's... He seemed to struggle for the right words. It's what decent folks do for each other out here. The frontier's too harsh to face alone. There was something in his expression, a loneliness that matched her own, that made Daisy relent. Then thank you, but I will find a way to repay you someday. No need. He stood, looking suddenly restless. I should let you both rest. I'll check back tomorrow if that's all right. Of course, Daisy replied, surprised by how much she wanted him to return. In the space of a day, this stranger had become something like a friend, perhaps the only one she had in Silverwood. After Zachary left, Daisy settled back in her chair, her thoughts in turmoil. She was overwhelmingly grateful for his help, but there was something else too, a warmth in her chest when he was near that both comforted and unsettled her. It had been so long since she'd felt anything but grief and worry that she hardly recognized the feeling. Joseph slept peacefully through the evening, waking only briefly when Mrs. Wilson brought dinner. His appetite was poor, but he managed a few spoonfuls of broth and a sip of water before drifting off again. Daisy ate her own meal mechanically, too preoccupied to taste it, her mind alternating between concern for Joseph and thoughts of the quiet cowboy who had come to their rescue. The next morning brought marked improvement. Joseph's fever had broken completely during the night, and though he was weak, his eyes were clearer and his breathing less labored. Dr. Wilson pronounced himself satisfied with the progress. "You've got a fighter here, Mrs. Miller," he said, smiling as Joseph gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Another day or two under observation, and then you can move to the hotel to complete his recovery." "Thank you, doctor. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "Seeing this little one recover is payment enough," he replied. "Though if you're of a mind to bake one of those apple pies Mr. Wade mentioned, I wouldn't object." Daisy laughed, the sound surprising her. It had been so long since she'd had reason to laugh. "It's a deal." Late that morning, Zachary returned as promised. He brought with him a small wooden horse, roughly but skillfully carved. "Thought the little man might like something to play with when he's feeling better," he explained, somewhat awkwardly, as he handed the toy to Daisy. "You made this?" she asked, turning the carving over in her hands. "Last night at the hotel. Helps me think." He looked embarrassed. "It's nothing fancy." "It's wonderful," Daisy assured him, genuinely touched by the gesture. She showed the toy to Joseph, who reached for it with a delighted smile, clutching it to his chest. "Horsey," he said clearly, looking up at Zachary with newfound admiration. "That's right," Zachary replied, his gruff voice gentling. "A strong horse, just like Midnight who brought you to the doctor." Joseph made a soft neighing sound, then dissolved into a fit of coughing that alarmed Daisy, but Dr. Wilson, who had entered the room, assured her it was normal. "The congestion is breaking up," he explained. "That's a good sign, though I know it sounds frightening." While the doctor examined Joseph, Zachary drew Daisy aside. "I wanted to let you know I've arranged for a wagon to take you both back to your homestead when the time comes. Borrowed it from a rancher I met yesterday, man named Bradford who owns the big spread north of town." "Mr. Wade, that's too much," Daisy protested. "I can't let you, it's all arranged," he interrupted gently. "Bradford owes me a favor from years back, said he was glad to help." Daisy studied him, trying to understand this man who seemed determined to solve all her problems. "Why are you doing all this? You don't even know us." Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on some point beyond her shoulder. "When my sister and her children fell ill, I was 2 states away. By the time word reached me, it was too late." His voice was low, tight with old pain. "I've always wondered if I could have saved them if I'd been there, maybe found a doctor in time or—" He shook his head. "When I saw you and Joseph, I had a chance to do what I couldn't do then." The raw honesty of his words struck Daisy to the core. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. "I'm sorry about your sister, and I'm grateful beyond words for what you've done for us." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition, a connection deeper than mere gratitude or kindness. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The moment was broken when Joseph called out for her. Daisy turned away, moving back to her son's side, but she could feel Zachary's gaze following her, and a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Over the next 2 days, Joseph's condition continued to improve steadily. He was still weak and tired easily, but his appetite returned, and with it, his usual cheerful personality. Dr. Wilson pronounced him well enough to move to the hotel, though he cautioned that the child would need at least another week of rest before attempting the journey home. The Silverwood Hotel was the finest establishment Daisy had ever stayed in. Their room was spacious and clean, with a large bed for her and a smaller one that had been brought in specially for Joseph. There were fresh flowers on the dresser and clean towels by the washstand. Luxuries Daisy had almost forgotten existed. "This is too much," she murmured when Zachary showed them to the room. "Not at all," he replied. "You both deserve some comfort after what you've been through." Joseph, delighted by the new surroundings, insisted on showing Zachary every feature of the room, his small hand trustingly in the cowboy's large one as he led him around. Daisy watched them together, her heart warming at the sight. Despite his intimidating size and reserved manner, Zachary had a natural way with children, answering Joseph's endless questions with patient good humor. "Will you stay for supper?" Daisy asked when Joseph finally tired himself out and curled up for a nap, still clutching the wooden horse. Zachary hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose. Please," she insisted. "It's the least I can do. We can have dinner brought up so Joseph doesn't have to go downstairs." He agreed, and they shared a simple but satisfying meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. As they ate, Daisy found herself telling him about her life growing up in Pennsylvania, meeting Thomas at a church social, their decision to seek a new life in the West. "It was hard at first," she admitted. "I cried myself to sleep every night that first winter, but Thomas never lost faith. He said we were building something that would last generations." "And now," Zachary asked gently. Daisy looked down at her plate. "Now I'm just trying to hold on to what we built, for Joseph's sake and for Thomas's memory." "It's a worthy goal," Zachary said. "But a heavy burden for one person to carry alone." "I don't have much choice," she replied with a small smile, "unless you know of any good farmhands looking for work in the middle of nowhere." Something flickered in his eyes, a thought quickly suppressed. "You'd be surprised. There are plenty of men who'd value a decent place to work and an honest employer." The conversation turned to Zachary's own past his years as a ranger, the places he'd seen in his travels, his nephew in Denver who wrote him letters full of scientific terms he could barely pronounce. "You must be proud of him," Daisy observed. "I am. Boy's smarter than anyone in the family ever was. Talks about going to medical school back east someday." "And you, what do you want for yourself?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Never thought much about it." "Just taking life as it comes, I suppose." Daisy sensed there was more to it than that, but she didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, their private hopes and disappointments. As the days passed, Joseph grew stronger, and Daisy found herself spending more and more time in Zachary's company. He seemed to have put off whatever business had brought him to Silverwood, instead dedicating himself to making their stay comfortable. He took them on short walks when Joseph was feeling up to it, carried the boy on his shoulders when he tired, and even read to him from a book of adventure stories he'd found in the hotel's small library. Daisy noticed how the townspeople treated Zachary with a mix of respect and caution. When she asked Dr. Wilson about it, the doctor chuckled. "Word gets around in a small town like this. Everyone knows he's an ex-ranger and there are stories. Nothing bad, mind you, just the kind of tales that follow a man with a reputation for handling trouble." "What kind of stories?" Daisy asked, curiosity piqued. "They say he tracked a band of outlaws across 3 states after they robbed a bank and killed a family in Texas, brought all 5 of them in alive, which is the impressive part." The doctor adjusted his spectacles. "Of course, that was years ago. He seems to have left that life behind." The information gave Daisy a new perspective on the quiet man who had become such a fixture in their lives. She began to notice things she'd overlooked before the watchful way he surveyed a room upon entering, how he always sat with his back to a wall, the slight hesitation before he smiled, as if the expression was unfamiliar to him. One afternoon, while Joseph napped, Daisy and Zachary sat on the hotel's front porch, enjoying the autumn sunshine. The topic of her return home had been weighing on her mind, and finally she broached it. "Doctor Wilson says Joseph will be strong enough to travel in a few days," she said, watching his profile as he gazed out at the street. "That's good news." His voice was neutral, but she thought she detected a note of something else, regret, perhaps. "I've been thinking about what happens after," Daisy continued carefully. "Winter will be here soon. There's so much to do to prepare the homestead wood to cut, repairs to make before the snow comes. Zachary turned to look at her, his blue eyes thoughtful. It's a lot for one person to manage. Yes, she took a deep breath. Mr. Wade, Zachary, I'd like to offer you a job, he blinked, clearly surprised. A job, as a farmhand, room and board plus a share of next year's crop. The words came out in a rush. I know it's not much and certainly not as exciting as cattle drives or whatever other work you might find, but yes, he interrupted, his expression softening. I accept. It was Daisy's turn to be surprised. Just like that, don't you want to think about it? What's to think about? You need help and I need somewhere to be. He hesitated, then added quietly, somewhere I might be of use. A warmth spread through Daisy's chest, relief, gratitude, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. Joseph will be thrilled. He's quite taken with you, you know. The feeling's mutual, Zachary replied, a rare full smile lighting his face. That boy's got spirit. Like his father, Daisy said automatically, then caught herself. And maybe a little like his new friend, too. The week that followed was filled with preparations for their departure. Zachary arranged for the wagon, purchased supplies they would need for the journey and the coming winter, and even found a gentle mare to replace Daisy's lame horse. Consider it an investment in the farm, he insisted when she protested the expense. Can't run a homestead without a good horse. Joseph, now almost fully recovered, followed Zachary everywhere, peppering him with questions and observations. The child who had been at death's door just days earlier now bubbled with energy, his cheeks pink with health instead of fever. The morning of their departure dawned clear and cool, perfect traveling weather. Dr. Wilson came to see them off, giving Daisy final instructions for Joseph's care and a small packet of medicine to take with them. You've been so kind, Daisy said, impulsively hugging the doctor. I don't know how to thank you. Just keep that boy healthy, he replied with a smile, and don't forget about that apple pie you promised. The journey home was considerably more comfortable than their desperate night ride had been. The wagon was well sprung, with a canvas cover to protect them from sun and wind. Joseph rode on the seat between Daisy and Zachary, chattering excitedly about everything he saw, while Midnight and the new mare, whom Joseph had dubbed Lady, trotted behind, tied to the back of the wagon. They traveled slowly, stopping frequently to rest and make sure Joseph didn't overexert himself. What had been a frantic night's ride became a leisurely 2-day journey, with a night spent camping beside a clear stream. As Zachary built a fire and prepared their simple supper, Daisy watched him with Joseph, noting the easy way they interacted, as if they'd known each other all their lives instead of just a few weeks. When Joseph insisted on helping to gather firewood, Zachary patiently showed him how to find the driest sticks, praising his efforts with the same seriousness he might have shown to a grown man. He's good with him, Daisy murmured to herself, a bittersweet ache in her chest. Thomas would have been the same way, patient, kind, teaching their son the ways of the world with gentle guidance. That night, after Joseph had fallen asleep in the wagon, Daisy and Zachary sat by the fire, sharing a pot of coffee. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead, reminding Daisy of that first desperate ride. I never properly thanked you, she said suddenly, for everything you've done. Zachary looked up from the fire, his face shadowed. You've thanked me plenty. No, I mean. Daisy struggled to find the right words. You came into our lives when we needed someone most. You saved Joseph, you've taken care of us, and now you're coming to help with the homestead. It's more than kindness, it's as if you were sent. I'm no angel, Daisy, he said softly, using her given name for the first time. Just a man who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Maybe that's what angels are, she replied. People who show up when they're needed most. Zachary looked uncomfortable with the comparison. I've done things in my life I'm not proud of, made mistakes I can't undo. Haven't we all? Daisy's voice was gentle. What matters is what we do with the time we have now. They fell silent, the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of the night surrounding them. Daisy found herself studying his profile, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way the firelight caught in his dark hair. There was a steadiness to him that she found increasingly comforting, a solid presence in a world that had seemed so uncertain since Thomas's death. What will people think? Zachary asked suddenly. A single woman taking in a male farmhand, they might talk. Daisy hadn't considered that aspect. I suppose they might, she admitted. But anyone who knows me knows I'm just trying to save the homestead for Joseph. Besides, the nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. They hardly ever visit as it is. Zachary nodded, but she could tell he was still concerned. I'll sleep in the barn, keep things proper. There's a small room off the kitchen, Daisy said. Thomas built it for farmhands, though we never had the money to hire any. It has its own entrance. That should be suitable. The conversation drifted to more practical matters, what work needed to be done first when they reached the homestead, how much feed the animals would need for winter, whether the roof would need patching before the snow came. Planning together felt natural, as if they'd been partners for years, rather than virtual strangers. When they finally turned in for the night, Daisy and Joseph in the wagon, Zachary on a bedroll near the fire, Daisy found herself lying awake, listening to the gentle breathing of her son beside her, and thinking about the unexpected turn her life had taken. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something like hope for the future. They reached the homestead the following afternoon. Seeing the small cabin and outbuildings from a distance, Daisy felt a surge of emotion, relief at being home, anxiety about the work that lay ahead, and a new feeling of possibility that hadn't been there when she'd left. Joseph, excited to be home, bounced on the wagon seat. Look, Mr. Zach. That's our house. And there's the apple trees Mama told you about. I see them, Zachary replied, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. Fine-looking place you've got here. As they drew closer, Daisy surveyed the property with a critical eye. The cabin looked sound, though the porch steps would need repair. The small barn where they kept their animals needed a new door, and the chicken coop was listing to one side. The vegetable garden was overgrown after their absence, and the last of the season's produce would need to be harvested quickly before frost claimed it. Zachary seemed to be making his own assessment. Good water source, he noted, nodding toward the well. Soil looks rich. Thomas chose well. He always said it was the best piece of land in the territory, Daisy replied, her throat tight with memory. They pulled up to the cabin, and Zachary helped them down from the wagon. Joseph immediately ran to inspect his favorite places, checking on the chickens and calling greetings to the cow in the paddock as if the animals could understand him. Inside, the cabin was just as Daisy had left it, clean but simple, with the main room serving as both kitchen and living area and 2 small bedrooms off to the side. The air was stale after their absence, and Daisy immediately opened the windows to let in the fresh autumn breeze. It's not much, she said, suddenly self-conscious as Zachary ducked through the doorway, his tall frame making the room seem smaller. It's a home, he replied simply. A good one. They settled in quickly, falling into a routine as if by unspoken agreement. Zachary unloaded the wagon and tended to the horses while Daisy put away the supplies and prepared a simple meal. Joseph, tired from the journey, fell asleep early, clutching his wooden horse as he had every night since Zachary gave it to him. After supper, they sat at the kitchen table, making plans for the work ahead. Zachary had brought paper from town and now sketched a rough map of the property as Daisy described it. The wheat's already been harvested, thank goodness, she explained. A neighbor helped with that before Joseph got sick, but there's firewood to cut and stack, the roof to check, animals to prepare for winter. We'll manage, Zachary assured her, one day at a time. As the weeks passed, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Zachary proved to be not just strong but skilled, repairing the barn door, patching the roof, building a new chicken coop that Joseph declared was the best chicken house ever. He cut enough firewood to last the winter, stacking it neatly along the side of the house, and even found time to mend the broken porch steps, For her part, Daisy harvested the last of the garden vegetables, preserving what she could for winter and kept the household running smoothly. Joseph thrived under their combined care, regaining his strength and filling the cabin with laughter. The first snow came early that year, just a light dusting in late October that melted by noon, but a reminder of what was to come. Zachary doubled his efforts, working from sunrise to sunset to ensure everything was ready. "You're working too hard," Daisy told him one evening as he came in, exhausted from splitting logs. "You need to rest sometimes." "Winter won't wait," he replied, but he smiled as he said it, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. They had grown comfortable with each other, sharing meals and conversation, working side by side during the day. Joseph adored him, following him like a shadow whenever possible, solemnly trying to help with tasks far beyond his capabilities. Zachary never seemed to mind, taking the time to explain what he was doing and why, letting the boy help in ways that made him feel important. It was during these moments that Daisy found herself watching them together, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. Zachary was nothing like Thomas, where her husband had been talkative and quick to laugh. Zachary was quiet and thoughtful. But there was a steadiness to him, a reliability that reminded her of the mountains in the distance, unchanging, solid, always there. The first real snowfall came in mid-November, 6 inches overnight, that transformed the landscape into a glistening white wonderland. Joseph was beside himself with excitement, begging to go out and play the moment he saw it through the window. "After breakfast," Daisy promised, laughing at his impatience. "And only if you eat every bite." Joseph had never eaten porridge so quickly in his life. Bundled in every warm garment they possessed, they ventured out into the snow-covered yard. Joseph's delighted squeals as he discovered the joys of snowballs and snow angels filled the crisp morning air. "Watch me, Mr. Zach, watch me," he called, attempting to roll a snowball that quickly disintegrated in his mittened hands. "You need to pack it tighter," Zachary advised, demonstrating with his own perfectly formed snowball. "Like this." What followed was an impromptu snow battle that left all three of them breathless with laughter and covered in snow. Even Daisy, who had intended only to supervise, found herself drawn into the game, shrieking with surprise when a well-aimed snowball from Zachary caught her square in the back. "Oh, you'll pay for that," she threatened, scooping up a handful of snow. Her aim was terrible, and Zachary easily dodged, laughing, a full, rich sound she hadn't heard from him before. The sound warmed her more than any fire could have. Later, as they sat around the kitchen table drinking hot chocolate, cheeks still flushed from the cold, Daisy found herself studying Zachary's face. There was an ease to his expression that hadn't been there when they first met. The hard lines around his eyes softened, the watchful tension in his shoulders relaxed. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. "Nothing," she replied, smiling. "Just thinking how different things are from a few weeks ago." His expression grew serious. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." As winter settled in earnest, their world contracted to the small homestead. Occasional trips to the nearest trading post for supplies were their only contact with the outside world. The isolation might have been oppressive, but instead, Daisy found it strangely peaceful. Their days had a satisfying rhythm, caring for the animals, maintaining the homestead, teaching Joseph his letters and numbers. In the evenings, after Joseph was asleep, Daisy and Zachary would sit by the fire, talking or sometimes just sharing comfortable silence. She learned about his years as a ranger, about the sister he had lost, about his dreams of perhaps someday having a place of his own. In turn, she told him about her life before the frontier, about meeting Thomas, about her fears and hopes for Joseph's future. It was during one such evening, with snow falling gently outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, that something shifted between them. They had been discussing spring planting, debating whether to expand the wheat field or try a new crop, when Zachary suddenly fell silent, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked, setting aside her mending. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, as if choosing his words with great care, "about the future, about what happens when spring comes." Daisy felt a flutter of anxiety. "You're not planning to leave, are you?" "No," he said quickly. "Not unless you want me to, but people will talk, Daisy. A single woman and a man living on the same property, even with separate quarters. It's not proper, not for the long term." "I don't care what people think," she replied, though she knew he was right. Already, there had been curious glances and whispered comments during their last visit to the trading post. "You should care," Zachary insisted gently. "For Joseph's sake, if not your own. A boy needs to grow up with his head high, not defending his mother's reputation." Daisy felt her cheeks flush. "What are you suggesting, then?" Zachary set his coffee cup down carefully, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm suggesting that maybe there's another solution, one that would be proper and might make sense for other reasons too." Her heart began to pound as she realized what he was saying. "Zachary, I know it's not romantic," he continued, his voice rougher than usual. "And I know I'm not the man you chose, but I care for you, Daisy, and I love that boy like he was my own. I would be a good husband to you if you'd have me. A good father to Joseph." Daisy sat very still, emotions churning within her. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, not just for propriety's sake, but because she had come to care for this quiet, steadfast man in a way she hadn't thought possible after losing Thomas. But another part hesitated, wondering if it was too soon, if she was betraying her husband's memory. "I don't expect an answer right away," Zachary said, misinterpreting her silence. "It's a big decision, I just wanted you to know how I feel." "It's not that," Daisy said softly. "It's just, Thomas hasn't been gone even a year. Is it wrong to feel this way so soon?" Understanding dawned in Zachary's eyes. "You loved him deeply. That doesn't change because he's gone." "Yes, I did." Tears welled in her eyes. "But I've come to care for you too, in a different way. You've brought something back to our lives that I thought was lost forever." Zachary reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The days that followed were charged with a new awareness between them. Nothing overt changed in their daily routine, but there were moments, a lingering glance, fingers brushing as they passed a plate at dinner, a shared smile over Joseph's antics that spoke of deeper feelings neither was quite ready to fully acknowledge. Joseph, with a child's intuition, seemed to sense the shift. One evening, as Daisy tucked him into bed, he asked the question she hadn't anticipated. "Mama, is Mr. Zach going to be my new papa?" Daisy froze, caught off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" Joseph looked at her with solemn eyes. "Because he takes care of us like Papa did, and he makes you smile again." Out of the mouths of babes, Daisy thought, her heart full. "Would you like that, if Mr. Zach became part of our family?" Joseph nodded vigorously. "He promised to teach me to ride midnight when I'm bigger, and he knows all about stars and wolves and everything." "Did he now?" Daisy smiled, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "Well, we'll have to see. Now go to sleep, my little man." That night, after Joseph was asleep, Daisy sat alone by the fire, thinking about her son's words. It was true Zachary had brought smiles back to their home. He had filled the emptiness that Thomas's death had left, not by replacing him, but by creating something new, a different kind of happiness, a different kind of love. Thomas would want her to be happy, she knew. He would want Joseph to have a father figure, someone to guide him as he grew. And Zachary, with his quiet strength and gentle patience, was a good man, the kind of man Thomas would have approved of. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the world outside transformed by a fresh snowfall that glittered in the early light. Daisy rose early, her decision made, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She found Zachary in the barn, already at work feeding the animals. He looked up when she entered, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Morning," he greeted her, his smile warming his blue eyes. "You're up early." "I wanted to talk to you," she said, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders, "about what you asked me." Zachary set down the hay fork, giving her his full attention. "I meant what I said about taking all the time you need." "I don't need more time," Daisy replied, stepping closer to him. "I know my heart, Zachary, and I know what Thomas would want for me for Joseph." Hope flickered in his eyes, but he remained still, waiting for her to continue. "You came into our lives when we needed you most," she said softly. "You saved my son. You've rebuilt our home, brought laughter back to it. I didn't expect to feel this way again, but I do. I care for you, Zachary Wade. And yes, I will marry you if you still want me." For a moment, he didn't move, and Daisy felt a flutter of uncertainty. Had she misunderstood? Had he changed his mind? Then, slowly, he closed the distance between them. His hands, rough from work but infinitely gentle, cradled her face. "I want nothing more in this world," he said, his voice husky with emotion. When he kissed her, it was tender and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. It was different from kissing Thomas, not better or worse, just different. A new beginning, a new chapter in her life. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the trading post, with the proprietor and his wife as witnesses, and Joseph proudly holding the wooden horse Zachary had carved for him. There was no fancy dress or wedding feast, just honest vows spoken from the heart and the beginning of a new family forged in unlikely circumstances. That night, after Joseph had been tucked into bed with stories of the spring to come and the adventures they would have together, Daisy and Zachary stood on the porch of the cabin that was now truly their home, looking out at the star-filled sky. "You ever think about how it all happened?" Daisy asked, leaning into the warmth of his embrace. "How different things might have been if you hadn't been passing by that night." Zachary's arms tightened around her. "I try not to, the thought of what could have happened." He shook his head. "Maybe it wasn't chance at all. Maybe this was always where I was meant to end up." Daisy turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "My very own angel, sent just when we needed one most." He smiled, the expression now coming easily to him. "Not an angel. Just a man who found his home and his heart in the most unexpected place." As snow began to fall gently around them, Daisy stood on tiptoe to kiss her new husband, grateful beyond words for the twist of fate that had brought him to her door on that desperate night. What had begun as a desperate ride to save her child had become a journey to healing, to hope, and to a love neither of them had been looking for but both had found. Spring came early that year, melting away the snow and bringing new life to the homestead. The apple trees Thomas had planted bloomed in glorious profusion, promising a bountiful harvest. The fields were plowed and planted, with Zachary and Daisy working side by side, planning for a future that now seemed full of promise rather than hardship. Joseph, now fully recovered from his illness and thriving under the care of both his mother and his new father, grew like a weed. True to his promise, Zachary began teaching him to ride, starting with the gentle mare they'd brought from Silverwood before eventually graduating to supervised lessons on Midnight, who proved surprisingly patient with the small boy. Their first year as a family passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. The wheat crop was the best the homestead had ever produced, thanks to Zachary's knowledge and Daisy's determination. They built a new room onto the cabin, a nursery, though they didn't tell Joseph yet what it was for. It was on a warm evening in late summer, with fireflies dancing in the gathering dusk and the scent of apple blossoms still lingering in the air, that Daisy shared her news with Zachary. They sat on the porch steps, watching Joseph chase the fireflies across the yard, his delighted laughter filling the evening air. "He's going to be a wonderful big brother," she said quietly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Zachary turned to her, his eyes widening as he understood her meaning. "Daisy, are you saying?" She nodded, smiling at his expression of wonder. "The baby will come in early spring. Dr. Wilson confirmed it when we were in town yesterday." For a moment, Zachary seemed unable to speak, overcome with emotion. Then he gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For Joseph, for this new little one, for making me part of your family." "Our family," Daisy corrected gently, leaning back to look into his eyes. "This is our family, Zachary, and it all started because you happened to be passing by on the night we needed you most." He smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright in the fading light. "Best detour I ever took." As darkness fell completely, they called Joseph in for bed. The three of them, soon to be four, making their way into the warm, welcoming cabin that had become truly a home. Outside, the stars appeared one by one in the vast Montana sky, witnesses to a love story that had begun in desperation, but blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. And in the years that followed, whenever anyone asked how they had met, Daisy would tell the story of that desperate night ride of a cowboy who rode through darkness and rain to save a child he'd never met, and in doing so, saved a woman's heart as well. It wasn't the love story she had expected, but it was theirs, forged in courage and kindness, tempered by shared grief and joy, and made stronger with each passing day. The baby girl born the following spring was named Grace, for the unexpected blessing she represented. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determination, and from her first day, she was adored by her big brother, who appointed himself her special protector. As the homestead prospered, and their family grew, eventually adding 2 more children to their brood, Daisy and Zachary never forgot how their story began. Each year, on the anniversary of that desperate night ride, they would take a moment to remember and give thanks for the twist of fate that had brought them together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, they would sit on the porch just as they had that first night, looking up at the stars and marveling at how a moment of crisis had led to a lifetime of love, a love story written not in grand gestures but in daily acts of kindness, commitment, and the quiet courage it takes to build a life together on the frontier.